All right, folks. Try that again. Get some echo here. Just one more time. One more time. Testing.
Hello, everybody. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We're working on that. Hang tight for us, please. Thank you for bearing with us.
All right, demo god. Testing, testing. All right, I think we got it. Okay. Let's go. Sorry, folks. All right. All right, so we talked about modalities. I'll try and cover this quick. Thanks. My name is Robin Smith. I'm the president of Fulcrum. I've got my co-founder, Justin Reedus, here as well. And we're here to talk about AI use cases, how we actually use AI from both a public and private perspective to secure customer environments, as well as interact with these Gen AI chatbots that have, been incredibly prevalent and multiplying over the last 18 months or so. In terms of modalities, we've just seen a complete proliferation. Chatbots were the start. We've moved into voice and video cloning for the purposes of phishing, business email compromise, wire fraud, as well as education to board members and CEOs around how easy it is to take 30 seconds of audio or video, use that to clone them, and then you can use that voice clone for nefarious purposes. We've also got, things like predictive analytics that talk about linear regression or decision trees to forecast future trends. These are things that might have been considered ML or machine learning back in the day, but now have pivoted over to the AI umbrella or AI heading as well. We've got recommendation systems that employ collaborative filtering and content-based filtering or decision trees to forecast future trends based on historical data. A good example of that would be sales forecasting to kind of optimize inventory management. Recommendation systems that employ collaborative filtering or content-based filtering to suggest products or content to users. Example here, Netflix suggesting movies based on your viewing history. Deep learning and neural networks. Stuart touched on this a little bit. The neural networks that utilize multi-layered approaches to model complex patterns in data. Examples here would be image and speech recognition, basically facial recognition in photo apps, voice assistants like Siri or Google, understanding speech, as well as things that are more complex and more edge around autonomous vehicles. So self-driving cars, interpreting sensor data to try and make decisions as well. So just a few different use cases. You can see this AI-generated image on the right-hand side was really a mashup of two different images, this one as well as this one that is from Gartner. This is their AI cybersecurity use case prism. So they're measuring both the business value as well as the feasibility of these use cases themselves. And that's really driving multiple conversations with both Gartner and Forrester, but worth touching on the fact that we see Gartner continuing to move down the field with all these different modalities, but these are the ones that are a little bit more cybersecurity. From a prompt engineering perspective, I've asked Justin Reedus, again, to come and help us here. One of the things that we've really focused on is persona engineering, and we do that via Claude and ChatGPT. But the idea here is to put together a canned persona that can be used as part of a project and that you can refer back to the persona and have it give you those responses with a lot of detail. I'll have Justin go into this in a little bit more detail, but what we're talking about specifically is defining tone, so stream of consciousness or impatience, style characteristics. Typically, when you're interacting with a chatbot, they're not going to do those parenthetical asides that you typically see in written emails or conversations between humans. You want to define an overall approach, whether you're direct and blunt, technically detailed, more informal from a language perspective, but the focus here is, using brief, punchy sentences mixed together with longer, complex ones so that the grammar gets a little bit more complex there. And Justin, you want to touch on some examples?
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Sure can.
All right, so this is like a basic approach to humanizing AI. About a year ago, you had to have, like what Robin was saying, a very specific list of instructions for it to not sound like an AI. But now, if you just tell it, hey, rewrite this less like an AI, be concise, it does a very nuanced attempt to not sound like an AI. Another trick I found is after you give it instructions like that, if you come back with, okay, halfway between that and the previous, it will blend together what you initially wrote and then what it tried to write into something that's usually much better than either at that point. The prompt 3, this is a generic one, like that applies to almost everything, but if you're getting short answers out of it, go ahead and ask for 10 versions. If you're wanting to try to rewrite a paragraph, maybe ask it for 2 versions. And then my favorite universal tip for dealing with chatbots is throw in assign confidence scores and sort by confidence. So if you're asking for 10 versions of a sentence and then you throw that on there, it will actually think about which one was the best answer, and you usually get better answers for one, and then you might find what you want right at the top rather than having to read through all of them. Then, as Robin was touching on, a more advanced way to do this is, specifically if you want to sound like yourself more than just not AI, you can take a chunk of text that you've written before that you like, and then ask it to analyze the tone, structure, style, and create a prompt to replicate your voice in the future. So on the right is some of the stuff that came out of my text, and it was kind of amusing. I ended up having to add to not curse to it because it picked up on my, I guess, frustration in the text that I put in there and informal language, and then decided that when it was going to write like me, it needed to curse. So with that instruction, it got a lot better. And you could take those instructions and stick them into a custom GPT within ChatGPT. So mine is like, say like me. So I just click on that, and then it already has this very specific set of instructions, like on the right, that get it to sound like me.
Yep. This ties back to the example of Stuart McClure during the keynote session with regard to his StuBot. So similar sort of training with regard to humanizing the output itself. One of the things that we also wanted to touch on is, all of, and this is just a subset of the Gen AI solutions that we've had success with. So we got Find with the PH, that's great for scripting assistance and code improvement. Claude has the biggest context menu, Claude from Anthropic. So it has a context window of about 500 pages versus ChatGPT has about a 70-page context window, so much, much larger there. We also wanted to mention Google's Notebook LM. So that is a way that you can put a corpus of documents or information into a project, and then what it'll do is it'll essentially create a podcast or a Cliff Notes version of what that content is, and bring it back to you in something that's a little bit more consumable that you could listen to in your car while you're commuting, for instance. Perplexity is really strong because of the fact that it is actively hooked into the internet and can give you references. So, some of the bias as well as hallucinations that you have problems with in the other Gen AI solutions, you can work around with Perplexity because you can force it to actually give you those references. ChatGPT, the O1 preview, makes it, kind of the smartest of the bunch, but really has sort of limited daily use. Grok, that's a new one that Elon's brought to the table. A little bit less ethical than Copilot, certainly. We've certainly touched on Notebook LM too. And then FreePick, the big draw there is you can certainly use DALL-E to go and do image generation utilizing AI, but what FreePick will do is allow you to do image upscaling as well as image editing, in a AI-generated fashion as well. So worth mentioning each one of those two. All right. So with regard to the strategic moves, AI's role in cybersecurity, certainly we see it adapting, much quicker than traditional methods. There still has to be that human element, the creativity as well as the critical thinking aspect of that the human is absolutely paradigm there. And it's, not just reactive, but proactive, does a better job of predicting and sometimes preventing threats where we have it hooked into SOAR automation platforms, RPA platforms as well. That is to say, though, attackers are using weaponized LLMs to write malware, write advanced persistent threats, as well as polymorphic malware. We'll touch on that a little bit. So that kind of turns it into a double-edged sword. The challenge kind of lies in ensuring that the algorithms don't learn from biased or incomplete data that could lead to blind spots. So Stuart touched on that as well. You want to have the iterative training model as well as the RAG status, potentially in two different LLMs. You have some method of doing fact checking between the two. But it's also worth touching on the fact that heavy dependence on AI can, lead to those security teams losing their ability to think critically or losing the sharpness as it is. So the key here is to use it as a tool, not a crutch. And, we see that crutch being more useful for the junior as well as maybe mid-tier sort of resources. When you get to sort of that architectural level or consultant level, it's a little bit more difficult to use it in that fashion, but there, are ways that you can drive there. Once, the AI, whether it's public or private, is, trained on bias data, it can overlook certain threats, disproportionately flag false positives, which we've actually seen in customer environments with some of the EDR platforms. So kind of ensuring that diverse and comprehensive data set is really crucial so that you can avoid those skewed security recommendations and then maintain fairness with regard to threat detection. All right. So, with regard to, AI being a white hat, is it threat detection on steroids, or is it just another way that we've reskinned machine learning, using that architecture? So from a network traffic anomaly perspective, machine learning algorithms are revolutionizing network traffic analysis by identifying outliers and anomalies that traditional rule-based, heuristic-based systems typically miss. We've actually seen examples of researchers at MIT developing private LLMs that can detect about 85% of cyber attacks by just analyzing raw network traffic data. And other tools, other vendors like Darktrace, using their enterprise immune system to detect things like, crypto mining in infrastructure as code within cloud environments for specific customers by doing things like identifying outbound data transfers or unusual patterns. And they do that to prevent, significant breaches. As far as, user behavior analysis goes, those, again, this is more of a, ML sort of use case, as well as just, standard deviation. We see, things like Microsoft's advanced threat analytics, ATP solution using machine learning to establish behavior baselines for users as well as different entities and then flag deviations based on those. So if you're plugged into the M365 ecosystem, some of the UEBA alerts that you're going to get from Microsoft are under the covers powered by this advanced threat analytics machine learning solution. And the, maybe a real world application we're sort of touching on here is there's an, Intercepts, UEBA, I think it's maybe Micro Focus or Securonics. That solution actually ended up helping a global financial firm uncover malicious insiders, exfiltrating sensitive data by just detecting anomalous file access patterns as well as off-hours activity. So again, when it comes to SIM use case detection, these are all things that you can sort of string together, with if-then clauses, but, with regard to UEBA, whether we're calling it AI or ML, still those are use cases that are absolutely applicable there. From an automated incident response perspective, this is where all the SOAR platforms come into space, whether it's, IBM, Palo Alto, Torque, Swimlane, things like that, multiple different SOAR platforms. But what we're seeing there is, essentially between a 50 to 80% reduction in mean time to response. So that's really the biggest, uptick there is the ability to handle more alerts in an automated fashion without the potential human element of false positives being introduced. So that ability to drive that mean time to respond also drives down the dwell time of attackers as well, and helps with things that are really easy, such as phishing email evaluation, detonating attachments as well as URL links within the solution itself, and then coming back to the analyst with a recommendation around, do you quarantine? Do you actually mark this as a false positive and move on? All right. So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but with regard to, cloning, what we're seeing, again, all of these different solutions that can be used for deepfake vishing or phishing. We ourselves have done multiple deepfake demonstration videos as well as audio cloning videos with the goal of educating both board members as well as C-level executives that, the social media presence that they have, their YouTube corpus of information, any Vimeo videos can be used for, that learning process. And solutions like PlayHT can take 30 seconds of audio from the victim, and then you can use your favorite chat bot or a company 8K for that matter, a quarterly earnings report to help put together something that's very believable for a help desk or an IT admin to do that, voice clone executives bidding. So this is kind of even more of an impetus for out-of-band verification methods as well as MFA within the environment, as well as for any edge services that you might be planning on using. So in terms of, some of the bullet points there, malware evolution, we've seen Emotet, it's a well-known banking Trojan, turned into a malware as a service platform. It's shown a lot of adaptability, constantly changing its code, delivery methods, as well as evasion techniques. In, I think, 2019, 2020, we saw Emotet using stealth techniques, including randomized macro sheet names, spreadsheet names, as well as different loader types, making that detection a little bit more challenging, especially when you're just relying on heuristic-based solutions. I also touched on, metamorphic malware or polymorphic malware, the ZMist virus. This came out way, way back in the early 2000s. It's probably one of the first examples of sophisticated polymorphic malware. It has the ability to completely rewrite its code each time it infects a new file. So again, the prevalence of the more modern EDR solution becomes even more important that are based on behavioral techniques versus those that are heuristic-based. And then in terms of the AI-powered malware, back in 2018, we actually saw IBM create a project called DeepLocker, and as a proof of concept, they put together some AI-powered malware. It used deep learning to hide its payloads until it reached specific targets, identified factors like facial recognition, geolocation, voice recognition, and it basically demonstrates how AI could be created with highly targeted as well as evasive malware. We talked about, we touched on, password cracking, a few different examples there. PlayStation 3s way back in 2009, 2010, putting all those together using that distributed cell processor to crack SSL certs. Rainbow tables at this point, rainbow tables with some of the GPU acceleration, we can actually see 15-character passwords, cracked within minutes. And the fact that, the GPUs themselves are so prevalent and so easy to get on the secondary market and make it very easy to put together things that utilize solutions like Hashcat to test billions of password combinations per second on, commodity human grade or consumer grade hardware as far as that. All right. Just a little bit. So this is one where, we've actually got some customer experience where we've had to tune both solutions such as Zscaler as well as Netscope to handle interactions with public LLMs that are, sanctioned or not, and hook those into the DLP program as well, or the DLP solution. So good example here, researchers that worked at DeepMind with Google, University of Washington, Carnegie Mellon, essentially used public LLMs to repeat multiple words over and over again, different capitalization, but essentially the same word, whether it's company, poem, et cetera. And what that eventually led to is the leak of email addresses, phone numbers for random law firms, as well as chunks of poetry, Bitcoin addresses, fax numbers, names, birthdays, social media handles. So with regard to ChatGPT and the ethicism of their training models, it certainly calls that into question. I know some of this actually hit the news, but effectively, spending as little as $200, you're able to generate tens of thousands of examples of PII and other data that's basically cribbed straight from the training model itself. So Justin, I'd like you to talk a little bit about how we've utilized SWIG solutions, SASE solutions like Zscaler and Netscope to help plug that leak. And then I think the next couple slides will touch on a little bit of chatbot privacy tips and maybe some Microsoft Copilot.
Yes, absolutely. So one rule that we've found to be super successful, and at this point, I'm pretty sure all of the leaders in the space can do it, but for sure, Zscaler and Netscope, is to combine their AI categorization with a basic DLP rule that will identify the company name when it's on a chatbot, right? And blocking that. This isn't, it doesn't solve everything, but it is amazing how many times humans will push the easy button, no matter what the policy is, if it, just for convenience. And by blocking the times where it has the company name in it, it kind of reinforces the company AI policy and brings it to mind for people, and you get better behavior out of people.
Could you describe the workflow for an end user when they try and actually upload something into or craft a prompt that has that company's PII, PHI, intellectual property data? What would the end user actually see in this behavior?
So in this case, Netscope actually is better than Zscaler because it will actually come back with the if you put it in there, the corporate AI policy in the block message, right? Whereas with Zscaler, because it's blocking it inside of the page, it just says an error has occurred. But I mean, eventually people put two and two together, and I would advise doing some communications to explain that. But people get it when they put in, they dump an email straight out of Outlook into it, and like read this, and write a response, and it doesn't work. They put two and two together when it's blocked there in Zscaler. But so pretty effective. So going on to the next one.
Sure.
So this actually got me, and I feel pretty versed in the generative AI, but there's, by default, if you don't turn it off, Gemini, ChatGPT, Perplexity are all training off of your interaction with the chatbot. So for their next model, all of that's going to go into it, unless you go in and turn it off. Claude's the only one of them that just does not do that. There's also some other advice would be definitely don't use your work email to sign up for any of these. Ideally, don't use any email that's tied publicly to you. There's a feature in ChatGPT so if you're talking about the abominable snowman or something that doesn't matter to you in general, but you're talking with your friends and you wanted some kind of information about it, you can go into the memory of ChatGPT and purge that out so that when you're talking to it later, it won't bring up, the abominable snowman for no reason, right? Or if, you have accidentally leaked something that you shouldn't have leaked, you can at least get it out of there.
Okay. All right. You want to touch on DuckDuckGo or anything like that?
No, I'm saying that would be in the past. If it was something that you would have gone to DuckDuckGo for, right? Then now would be the time to use like a temporary chat.
Got it. All right. Thank you much.
All right. So the next slide is about Microsoft Copilot. So this helps solve the same problem. Like now that it's here, users are going to use it, right? Like they're going to want to have it read their email, help write the new email. Like it's almost unavoidable at this point. So if Microsoft is in the best position to do this in a secure way, they already have your data. They're already covered by a BAA. They have mature compliance department. If you end up, something does happen, you could get blood out of that turnip versus out of OpenAI. So in general, I've got high hopes for them, but they have kind of lagged behind in the capabilities versus the other LLMs. And I believe this is because of the controls that they put in place to prevent things like hallucinations and data leaks and whatnot. So that, yeah, they're running a little bit behind, but universally, everybody has noted the ability to take notes and come up with action items out of meetings is stellar and super impressive and very useful immediately. I'm starting to see other things that are, I can see the use cases evolving, like in the picture on the slide, in a spreadsheet, it did data cleanup. It was like there was a misspelling here, there's spacing issues here. Useful. Again, I've got high hopes. They're positioned very well to deliver a ton of value as they improve their functionality.
Yep. Still some way to go, though. Right. And Steve and Cody, I see your hand up, and Mira, I see your question as well. So we'll come back and answer those a little bit later. So with regard to honeypots, and how we can actually use AI solutions with honeypots as well, we'll touch on that. But one of the things we're touching on before we move into that is bad guys are also playing to our base human weaknesses. So security software producer in this space, Silent Push, has actually observed one of the Fin7 attack groups, aka I think they're called the Sangria Tempest group, using new tactics to push malware as well as phishing techniques. And the way that they're doing it is they're actually embedding within 7 or 8 different websites the ability for the browser extension to drop different MSIX malware variants. And unfortunately, those websites that they're serving up are all about AI deep nude generators. So again, kind of playing to our base human context as well. But in terms of how we're able to sort of turn the tables on the attackers, back in 2015, we saw the rise of the honeyfish system, which turns the tables on them by feeding them false credentials. And these approaches basically waste attackers' time and also allow researchers to track activities as well as the infrastructure that they use. With regard to other honeypot solutions, Traffic Security has a solution called Deception Grid that's AI powered as well. It dynamically adapts to the attacker's behavior. In a couple different use cases, we've seen it detect and contain new variants of the Emotet malware within minutes of the initial infection attempt, which again, mean time to detection, mean time to remediation, dwell time goes way down as a result of that. And then if you're playing in the open space area, we have to do this on a beer budget versus the caviar and champagne budget. MITRE actually has Caldera, an automated adversary emulation system that uses AI to simulate attack scenarios. And this is the type of virtual playground that allows security teams to test defenses against those evolving threats in a more controlled sort of space. In terms of digital deception, I think Mike's going to touch on this a little bit as well, but there's numerous platforms that use AI to create and manage thousands of different dynamic decoys across different networks, enterprise or otherwise. And in some case studies that we've seen, for financial institutions typically, where you've got the higher degree of fraud detection or fraud, that is able to actually reduce that mean time to detect by about 84 different %. All right, then we move into next-gen identity and access management. So, keep hearing identity is the new perimeter, and identity-based risk behavior analysis is going to become more and more prevalent. So we've seen solutions that use behavioral biometrics. There's one called Behaviosec that was purchased by LexisNexis back in 2020. They've got technologies that can identify users based on typing patterns, mouse movement, mobile device handling, and some of their customers, specifically, again, this is FinServ space, actually see fraud reduced by about 50, 60% within 6 or 7 months of deployment. IBM also has a solution that uses AI to analyze user behavior, type of stuff, mouse movements, typing patterns. Again, financial sort of customer base is going to be the main focus there. From a RBA perspective, this is also something that if you're a Microsoft customer, you have the ability to go and turn on with the Azure AD identity protection. I think it's actually on by default in most cases. But What that uses, again, machine learning algorithms, we touched on this earlier, to detect and prevent, risk-based access attempts, geographically impossible logons, high-risk logons from unknown browsers, multiple simultaneous logons from different IP addresses, things like that. And then, Okta, which we're all pretty familiar with, their adaptive MFA solution also uses AI to kind of assess the risk of each one of those login attempts and basically adjust, RSA has been doing this for years too, adjust the authentication requirements accordingly. So we could see someone, come in with an unknown browser, the MFA solution recognizes that and then steps them up to have to do a number challenge or a biometric challenge versus just a standard, one-time code plus your password. And that's the type of thing that we want to see. And we actually have seen a prevalence in the healthcare system as well. Moving along here. All right. So with regard to, the AI arms race, it's very much the security vendors and the attackers both going at it together. So we kind of touched on this polymorphic malware a little bit earlier, but researchers at Deep Instinct developed an AI-powered malware that can autonomously modify its code to evade detection. Unfortunately, in testing, this type of malware is 100% effective, especially if the AV solution is only using heuristics. So it just kind of goes as a word of warning. If you're using a traditional AV solution that only is based on heuristics versus behavior, there's a very good chance that this is the type of thing that could slip by you as well as dwell in the network. OpenAI, even with their GPT-3 model, 12 months ago, has demonstrated the ability to go ahead and create functional exploits for known vulnerabilities. So even if there's 0 days, there's the ability to go and use those to pivot into actual exploits. And Microsoft is basically revealed, how adversarial machine learning techniques can be used to manipulate inputs as well as full AI-based malware detection systems by targeting their blind spots, essentially. So again, having that separation between the inference and training models and the LLMs behind them, incredibly important. And that's just a good example of why you would want to have that separation between the two. In fact, IBM, I touched on this earlier, with that Deep Locker project, they're now exploring this new field called large language model unlearning. And what that's centered on is removing the influence of unwanted data on trained LLMs so it behaves as if it never saw the information, yet it retains all of that essential knowledge necessary for potential RAGs. And it goes back to Justin's points around crafting your prompt and your persona as well. So we want to make sure that that's still persistent, but we also want to make sure that we remove the blind spots and potential bias so that the attackers can't use that against us and start leveraging that. All right. So with regard to securing the AI, protecting it from itself, keeping the models on a strict no poison regimen. Data poisoning attacks severely compromise the AI model integrity. Researchers at UC Berkeley and MIT actually demonstrated how even 3% training or 3% poisoning of a training data set could basically lead to between a 10 and 20% decrease in model accuracy. So implementing those robust data validation processes, as well as the techniques like differential privacy, has an ability to basically mitigate some of those risks, but it's a little staggering to think that, that small input, that small 3% poisoning or even 1 or 2% poisoning could have such a big impact on the other end of the funnel as far as it goes. So continuous monitoring, validation of the AI models in production is incredibly critical. Microsoft's Azure machine learning solution incorporates some automated ML learning or automated ML monitoring to detect data drift and model degradation. And that's just one way that you can use sort of a canary in the coal mine again for earlier detection of potential issues and a way to maintain that model reliability over time. When it comes to model protection itself, protecting them from theft and the reverse engineering continues to be a growing concern for the customers that are going and pursuing their own private LLMs. So we've seen customers go and pursue techniques like model watermarking, as well as embedding unique identifiers into the model that won't actually affect their performance. This essentially allows us to have ownership attribution as well as verification, so that if that model is snuck out the door, there's a way that we can potentially detect those stolen models. And then, with regard to kind of walking that line between efficiency as well as data privacy, Justin, I think you touched on this a couple of days ago. Something that works in the U.S. might be completely off limits within the EU, just with regard to their data privacy laws, as well as regulations. I know there's been a drive within the U.S. Federal space to have a unifying set of AI guidelines as far as data leakage as well as data privacy, but we're not quite there yet. We're still on a state-by-state sort of basis at this point, but we continue to see more and more evolution in that particular space as well. All right. When it comes to using AI, I know some of you that have cloud workloads, public cloud workloads are using solutions like Wiz, Orca, Lacework, Prisma Cloud, or even native solutions like AWS Config that have machine learning capabilities and continuously go and evaluate the resource configurations against well-known compliance rules. Our thoughts, and maybe the analyst thoughts as well, Gartner, Forrester, et cetera, are that by 2025, 2026, more than 50% of organizations that actually have those cloud workloads are going to be using some sort of AI-powered solutions for automation around compliance monitoring. It's just too large to handle from a human perspective. So, we're seeing more and more as far as that goes. And furthermore, some of the solutions that we've named also have the ability to, using a Gen AI chatbot, typically publicly proud, some of them are private LLMs, to give you the coaching that you need so that you can actually close up those gaps and handle the remediation in a semi-automated fashion with the human element included. But solutions like the Azure Security Center use machine learning to detect those misconfigurations and then provide remediation suggestions. I know a number of the other solutions do that as too, but worth mentioning that too. Maybe last but not least, from a crypto jacking perspective, this is incredibly painful when you get that multiple $100,000 bill from your public cloud provider. We're seeing vendors like Aqua Security who are talking about crypto jacking attacks increasing 150, 250% year over year, and that just kind of emphasizes the need for some of the CSPM, CWPP solutions in the workspaces. All right. Michael, I've got a few more slides, but I don't want to cut you short. I can send out the remainder of the slides if you want to take a couple minutes to cover what Datadome does. But before we do, why don't we cover some of the questions that we've gotten? So
I've already answered some of them, and I'm in the middle of answering. Well, I guess I can do it right now. So the Illusion Black, so long-time fan of honeypot. If a honeypot gets hit and it's not in your list of scanners, right, that you've whitelisted on it, it's time to send up the bat signal. It's a high confidence alert that something is going on. And specifically, Zscaler bought Illusion Black, and we've been trying it out. It's easier to configure. It's better with false positives, and it comes out of the box with numerous integrations. So I'm a fan of it so far, to answer that question. I think we got all the other questions now answered. Marcus, we'll come back to yours. Mike, want to take it away? I can go ahead and stop sharing.
Yeah, Robin, with just a few minutes left, I won't want to step on your toes here. It might make sense for you to join a later session. If you just got a few more slides you wanted to talk through, I'd be happy to let you keep the floor.
Okay, I appreciate that. Let me see if I can get back to it real quick. All right. So this one's probably the most important one. This is all really cool. We've given you plenty of different use cases, lots of talking points, but the thing that's maybe most important is how do you explain the ROI to the executive management, the people that are actually writing the checks? So the first one is we want actionable metrics here. So quantifying the ROI of artificial intelligence within cybersecurity kind of requires us to focus on metrics that directly impact business objectives. Multiple studies, Capgemini, Gartner, et cetera, have been authored, and what we're seeing there is AI-driven cybersecurity solutions, on average, provide a 21% decrease in mean time to detect threats, 20% reduction in downtime as a result of the attackers, pivoting in the environment and bringing down services, and then a 12% decrease in security breaches. So, those are real numbers that you can actually stand behind with regard to what is the return on investment for some of these security tools. The other is, the reduction of false positives. So, reducing false positives, super crucial for demonstrating the value of AI within security operations. A Ponanon Institute study itself found that, security teams spend about 25% of their time chasing false positives. On average, that costs an organization anywhere between, $800,000 to $1.5 million annually. So the ability to, leverage those AI-driven security and threat detection systems, threat detection tools, are able to reduce, false positives by about 60% in customer deployments, and that frees up your analysts to go and focus on things that are a little bit more important versus the tier 1, tier 0 sort of triage. And then, also recognizing the fact that, the training and tuning and the talent behind it, it isn't something that's 100% exclusive to the AI solution. So while they deliver those significant benefits, the total cost of ownership also has to take into account the human element. So the hidden costs of AI projects can be up to 2 to 3 times what the initial investment is, just due to those ongoing expenses like data preparation, model training, hiring specialized talent to write use cases. So what we found is, median annual salary for AI specialists is approaching just $150,000, $200,000. We're seeing that drive up year over year. And that just highlights the need to factor in talent acquisition and retention costs when you handle the calculation of return on investment. So I think that pretty much wraps it up. Mike, I want to make sure that you got a couple minutes to cover Data Dome. And if anybody else has any questions, we can stick around a little bit longer and cover those before we move on to the next session. Mike, I'll give it to you, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Robin. And I've actually been chatting with Kaylin in the background here. I think I might be able to jump into one of the later sessions today. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with everybody, sharing a little bit about Data Dome, because we fit really well into this conversation that we're having around AI and the digital Thunderdome, as you put it there, between both good use cases and potentially malicious. Data Dome's actually one of the leaders in the bot detection and mitigation space. So what we've done is use our depth in training and thousands of different ML models to be able to better detect and prevent online automation that might be victimizing any of your online properties, your websites, apps, APIs, and by using these machine learning models to be able to sort of sift through the typical flow of data, the typical requests and sessions, we're able to find those anomalies that are automation, and within just 2 milliseconds identify and block those examples. So that is tremendous in helping to free up cloud hosting infrastructure to combat those bots without using your team's valuable time and resources, and ultimately prevent fraud along the way.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, and hopefully you can join that session a little later on. Chad Phillips, I saw you had a question, so I've unmuted you, and you have the ability to talk, sir. Go ahead. Chad, can you hear us?
didn't have a question.
Oh, okay. All right. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you putting up with the technical difficulties, getting the double audio stuff fixed. So thanks for your patience as far as that goes. Again, there's a couple more slides we didn't have time to cover. We'll send out the entire deck if anyone wants a separate private session with Justin, myself, or any of our AI architects. Happy to set that up with you. But yeah, thank you very much for taking the time, and looking forward to the next call, next presentation. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.